today. Hey, Marlana. So for popping in, please enjoy the music while you wait. In fact, if you're new to Butter, please feel free to soak in the new thing that you're seeing here. Perfect. Someone found the reaction there. You can press any number that you recognize to get that going. And we'll be starting in a bit. For those of you who are new to the Butter community, the Butter mixing community is actually something that we have. Basically, most people like Caitlin who are experts in their own right and who share something to us about facilitation, techniques, collaboration, innovation, and in this case, how to actually make ourselves more productive as people in the right way. So we're going to be kicking off today. Like, there's a lot of, I saw the presentation she has, and there's a lot of needs that we tip and tools that you can actually use for your own work. Hopefully you get a lot out of it. And since we're already 8 minutes into time, I'm going to be pausing this for a bit, and hopefully more people will join in. If ever, we'd also like to know actually where you're joining in from. So feel free to share in chat. I myself am joining in from hamster. He looks like a steal. That man is dressed to kill. We have a full UK group today. Oh yes, we're pulling in the other little part. Imagine that. I think most people are feeling the warmth, with extreme warmth actually. Okay, so with that, I'll be passing it over to you. I hope you guys a lot of tips today. Okay. And Caitlin, so as I mentioned earlier, this session is going to be all about sustainable productivity toolkits, and we're actually going to be reframing the way we look at productivity. So the person who will be leading the session today is Caitlin. She is in the best position to introduce herself later, but she actually has an interesting background story as well, if you haven't seen in the description to this event as well. I'm Cheska. I'm the one leading growth here at Butter. I'll be her co-pilot for today, but the show is really all going to be about her. And what we hope for you to get out of this session today is really all the techniques, the tools, and the methods you can use to practically apply productive tips to your own life. Okay, and take it away, Caitlin.
Thank you for joining. Sorry about the slight delay in starting. Yeah, I think probably we've got a lot more people signed up who I think potentially it's the sunshine, because the weather is nice everywhere. So I reckon maybe a few people are out in the sun. So thank you so much, Cheska. I'm going to get started straight away because I know that we are starting a little bit late. So this is the Sustainable Productivity Toolkit for very busy people. I'm sure you're all very busy. I'm just going to quickly go through what we're going to cover. So a few essential concepts of sustainable productivity, and actually we're kind of working on this idea now and expanding it a little bit. So I'll tell you about that as well. Some key productivity tools, tips, and systems. The power of breaks, which is something that I'm very passionate about. And finally, why you can't control it all, which I think is a big thing that is left out of a lot of these things. We're going to dive into it. It says an optional Q&A at the end, but if you want to ask any questions throughout, please do. Cheska's also going to be around helping with tools and things, so we can definitely converse as we go through. So I always feel weird introducing myself. I don't know why. I say I'm a productivity person, but that's not to say that I'm always a productive person. It's that I'm very interested in how we can be more productive, be high impact, be high performers, but without really, I don't want to be too dramatic, but like losing ourselves in the process, right? Like I think so many of us who are ambitious go through that kind of process. I think it's important to note that I obviously am founder of Interlude. It actually was an app before it was, now I do corporate workshops, but before it was an app. And why that's important to tell you is because that became very unsustainably productive. And we pivoted away from that to focus on these corporate workshops and community workshops because we just weren't living the values that we were trying to share with people. I'm also a leader. I have the head of brand and culture at a tech startup called Metricus, where I am a line manager, but I'm also an employee. So I think it's really important to see that I'm not just like someone who's self-employed and is like, I manage all my own time and I'm going to tell you how you should use yours. It doesn't really make sense, right? What's really important to know is that I had a crazy, crazy allergic reaction about 12 years ago now, when I was in my first term at uni, and I went blind for about a month, and I have a permanent vision impairment now. And the reason I say that is because it's where all of these ideas came from. I was studying at Cambridge, and I was like, if I'm going to stay, if I'm going to get through this degree, I need to figure out how to look after myself and be a high performer at the same time. And so I think that I had these lessons kind of hard won at a really young age, at 18, that most people have to kind of hit rock bottom later on to find. And so I want to really help people learn these things earlier on and not have to go through burnout or any of those other awful things in order to understand them. So I also am a really, really big believer in better work days and our own agency to make our work days better. I've worked in some amazing companies. I've worked for some terrible companies. And in both of those situations, I think we have a lot more power than we believe and than we understand to make our own work lives better. I'm going to get into all of that. In the meantime, I've just skipped a slide. Oh, there we go. So here are my socials. I would love you to share your learnings. I'm actually going to drop them in the chat so that you don't have to go and search me. I would really, really love to see lots of things on the socials when I come off about your learnings and sharing your tips. And it's not about you just doing the things that I say, it's about people learning from each other as well. So there are some links for you. And now we're going to get into it. So, some expectations. I never, ever, ever tell anyone what to do. That is not the point. In fact, that is what I'm entirely against, is productivity gurus being like, this is how you have to do something. That is not, it's not just my opinion, that's science. You have to find things for yourself. But what I do expect from you, and I think this is kind of goes without saying in the butter community, is being fully participating, open-minded. Is my Wi-Fi dropping off a bit?
No, you're all good.
Okay, it's just jumping on my side, fine. So yeah, just to be open-minded, there are going to be things that we'll talk about that you may have heard before, and you may be like, oh, I already knew that. But my question to you is, with respect, are you doing it? Are you trying it? Is there something that you might be able to revisit and really to interrogate things for yourself? I promise it's not just me talking the whole time. So I would really love you to leave today with an understanding of sustainable productivity and at least one new idea or tool to try. Julie, thank you for letting me know. I annoyingly don't really know what I can do to fix that because I'm on the strongest
You
Wi-Fi.
can't. Yeah, you can't.
No.
It's not a deal breaker, but it is just sort of a bit static.
Yeah,
you know.
it's so annoying because
Let me
I've
also
been on
check.
calls all day and it's been fine.
Don't worry about
I
it.
think
Just keep going. It's all good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if it's shout though if it's bothersome, if it's like a real problem, and maybe I'll just turn my camera off and see if that helps. But I've literally been on Zoom calls all day. It's so annoying. The most important thing is that you can see the slides. So as long as you can see that, my face doesn't matter so much. Okay. So yeah, I would love you to leave, and thank you, Julie, for pointing that out. Please do let me know. So a bit of an understanding of what we're talking about when I say sustainable productivity, and I'd love you to have at least one new thing that you try or try again. So we're going to start with a little bit of creativity. I would love you to take a moment on a butter board that, if you haven't used it before, is really lovely, and just to express how you feel when you think about the word productivity, because I'm really conscious that for some people it is not a great feeling, right? It can bring up feelings of restriction and stress and tension. So we're just going to have a very quick doodle.
So I'll give, we can do around a minute. And yeah, just feel free to get creative and express what productivity means to you.
And it can also, I know that this is very, it feels different on different days. So if you want to do today, because it can sometimes be hard to, pinpoint it, And yeah. Okay, Marlana, let me add some. I'll do while you do this. I'll add them in again. Don't know why that's not happening. Tech problems today.
Perfect. Does anyone maybe want to share a bit about what they drew? Just maybe share a bit about this looks particularly interesting. This one. Just take everyone.
Yes, it's me. Hello. It's
Hey,
Romy.
Romy.
I just wanted to write a text because it's very small there. For me, it's productive. It's just to create an environment where I can play, where I can. I think it's the mental frame of just taking the word productivity. It's just sometimes hard because we are so much conditioned on it. But if I say I stay in a flow and I play, I think I am most creative. I bring the most of my creativity and everything. I think to be in flow, to bring together productivity with flow, it's very important.
Does anyone
I love
else
that.
want to?
The butterboard is quite addictive, isn't it? Julie, go for it.
I chose a roller coaster of the peaks and the troughs because I think, I find I have moments of brilliance and then other times when I just don't have that energy. And one thing I've learned is to sort of, there's two things. One is changing your energy and kind of getting yourself out of the trough. The second is actually not forcing the square peg through the round hole, and actually sometimes it's good to listen to yourself and go, you know what, this time of day is not the best for me, but this other time of the day is better for me. And actually I'll be more productive if I park things for now and actually do it at the best time when my energy is at its peak. I don't know whether others have that same feeling as well. Welcome any comments.
Yeah, you've touched on some really key things there that I think actually a lot of people struggle to see, and recognizing your energy levels. We're going to talk about those peaks and troughs as well, which is really important. Hopefully the links are working now. Again, it's strange because I just had them with someone else and they're working fine, but it's fine. We move. This is part of what we're saying, Julie, right? You've just said about the peaks and troughs. I think a really big part of this is getting into a place where you can manage those things and just be like, does it matter? No, not really. I've got bigger things to worry about, right? I'm going to close the butterboard now. I'm sorry. I always feel like I'm taking someone's toy away from them because it's so nice to do it. Like, how often do we get to do that, Can I bring the deck back, please? Thank you so much. Thank you everyone who did that and also who got involved with the answers. So we're going to start with reworking productivity. I hope you see what I did there, putting work in the middle. So I think it's really important to recognize that work is really, really tough a lot of the time. No one really teaches us what good work looks like. Like, unless you have a really excellent manager or maybe a mentor or a coach, most of us, or maybe a parent who's, able to share that, most of us just have to figure out what it looks like for ourselves. And sometimes that can lead to really unsustainable habits. Like, you know, things that we did when we first started, when we were a grad or whatever, and we're still doing it now. And it's just this cycle. And I put on the side here, some of the things that contribute to this. So our always on culture, our high pressure roles, difficult colleagues. I know I have quite a few of those. The physical environment that we're in. So for example, like the Wi-Fi in this room is so temperamental. It usually is great, but obviously it's right now that it decides to be a brat. Really frustrating. That can impact your productivity. World events, God knows there's a lot going on right now. There has been for the last 4 years, and that does take a toll on us. Our own limitations. So, for example, I was telling you about my disability, but it could be anything else that you're working with chronically or now. And our own ambitions. It sounds weird to put that as a limitation almost, but sometimes that can get in the way of us feeling sustainably productive. And then finally, the unbelievable amount of information being thrown at us at every waking moment. I saw something recently that said that we are getting more information in a day than our grandparents would have had in like a year, just bombarded constantly. So there's a lot that's going on for us. So none of us decide. In fact, can I get a reaction if anyone feels like they can sometimes be a bit toxic in the ways that they work? And no one wants to be like that. No one's like, oh, I'm going to be toxic today. But it's like, do you ever kind of come out of your working day and feel like things that I did myself were not particularly sustainable? They didn't make me feel that good. Yeah, I think a lot of us can feel like that. And so to define it, toxic productivity is an unhealthy obsession with maximum productivity that compromises an individual's mental and physical health, often leading to burnout, a reduction in quality of work, and diminished life quality. And part of the problem with this at the moment is there's a lot on social media, a lot out there that's kind of glorifying not just hustle and grind, but this kind of weird like influencer day in the life, like perfect day, and it's made to look like it's not grindy, but it's still this pressure, right? Yeah, trough, fantastic word, and I feel like it's also quite emotive, right? It feels like what it is. So instead of toxic productivity, what I've been thinking a lot about is anti-toxic productivity. So when you signed up to this, it said sustainable productivity, but the more and more I've been thinking about it, I think there's more to it than just that. I think sustainable is one part of it. And so how I'm starting to define anti-toxic productivity is intentionally working in a way that helps us as individuals to feel great and achieve remarkable things without the personal price tag, making work more sustainable and enjoyable. And so there's 3 key words in there: intentional, sustainable, and enjoyable. And the reason I'm calling it anti-toxic productivity is because it's not just one thing. And what I mean by that is it's not one thing for Debbie. It could be something else for Cheska. It could be something else for Romy. But it could also be something different for Marlana in the winter than it is in the summer, right? Because a lot of us struggle seasonally and things like that. And so why I'm calling anti-toxic productivity is it's almost like replace the word anti-toxic with whatever the kind of productivity is that you need right now. So that could be positive, it could be focused, it could be clean, whatever it is, whatever suits you. And so that anti-toxic word is just anything that's not toxic. I hope that makes sense. And I hope that my Wi-Fi is being not too terrible. So, Julie, exactly what you were just saying. What we want to do is have less of these peaks and troughs. But I think it's also really important. A lot of these like productivity people on YouTube and socials and stuff will have that. Have you seen that kind of like hockey stick graph that's like, take your productivity from here to here? And I actually think that's really damaging because that's not often how productivity actually works. It's not how anything works, really, is it? Like what we want is less of this, but we want more of this. So we're recognizing that those highs are going to be there, which is great. Like we want them to be high, but we don't want them to be high at the cost of a low, right? And we also want to recognize that the lows are going to happen, but that we want to be able to ride them out. You know, we want to be able to be like, they're here, I'm in it right now. I actually just had a founder message me and say, I feel like the last 10 years were a waste. And I was like, yeah, I've been there. And he was like, how do I get out of it? And I was like, I think sometimes you need to ride it. You need to be like, this is a bit rubbish. I'm in a low point. What can I do each day to make me not feel like the day was a waste? But also recognize that if you're down here at the bottom of a trough, you're not immediately going to be at a peak a minute later, right? You've got to ride it back out. If I could leave you with kind of a mantra to take away, you've probably heard this kind of terrifying number that we work for on average 90,000 hours in our lives. Getting higher, because obviously we're retiring later. But I would really like us to concentrate on not just enduring our 90,000 hours, but making them the best they can be. And this is what I mean when I'm talking about personal autonomy. Like, I've been in places with awful bosses, really awful, and like difficult teams and things like that. But I really believe in thinking about, okay, what's one thing I can do to make the hours that I spend here the best they can be given the circumstances? I think that's what's important, given the circumstances. I really understand that a lot of you may be in a bit of a difficult working situation at the moment, and it's not as easy as just quitting, especially not in this job market. So I really want this to just be a way of thinking about what is the best thing that we can do right now and iterating all the time. My slides are being slow productivity today. So I'm just going to have a look in the chat because I've seen some things coming up. Oh, I've not seen that. I've not seen that. Thank you, Romy. I love it. If I could show you my stack of books beside me, that looks great. I'm going to look that up afterwards. Any book recs, pop them in the chat. I would definitely like to see those. Okay, we're going to go into some productivity tools, some talking, some breakouts. We'll see how far we get, given that we started a little bit late, but I think we should be fine. So, like I said, I'm never going to tell you what to do, but there are some things that are just true. And one of them is that you need to plan. I really don't care how you do it. I just care that you do it. And this is going to look different for everyone. Like, someone who's got people that they need to care for, be that parents, children, anyone that you're looking after, pets, whatever, you're going to have more things that you need to work with than someone like me who just is looking after themselves. So I just want us to start building this today. I'm going to send you some stuff afterwards so that you can follow up on this. But I just want us to start building some foundations today. So, big important thing. The tools that we're going to talk about today do not work for everyone. They shouldn't work for everyone. We all have different brains. We're all working with different things, bodies, all sorts. So finding the best results really does require building and using a toolkit that works for you. Julie, love that book. The first event I ever put on at my first like proper job, Helen was a speaker at it. Helen and Sarah are speakers. So I've been following them for a long time. It's a great book. Okay, not everything's going to work for you. You got to find what works for you. The next thing that's important to just recognize is that there's two kind of main types of work. Shallow work, we're talking admin, light work, bits and pieces, just things that we need to just get on with. Deep work and flow, two slightly different things, but kind of in the same bucket. And I'll send you some bits if we don't know like too much about them. But essentially that work where it's like head down, focused, maybe it's creative, problem solving. We want to be headphones on, no distractions. And typically most work falls into those two things. I would also put like most meetings into shallow work. But then obviously you have some that are more strategic that fall into deep work as well. So keep that in mind while we're thinking about it. The next thing to think about is Parkinson's law. And this is very simply the idea that work expands to fill the time that it's given. So a great example is if you were someone like me in school who would not do homework until the night before. And like, if you're going to leave it that long, it's going to take that long, right? Whereas if you're one of those great people who just does a task and prioritizes it and puts it in as soon as you get it, it doesn't take so long. It's quite simple. And yeah, it took me 15 years to figure that out. So another thing just to bear in mind when we're talking about these things. So Cal Newport, in fact, I don't want this to get laggy. So there's a book called Slow Productivity by Cal Newport. I have it beside me here. Top tier, absolutely fantastic. I feel like if you're here, you'll like it. It's so good. His podcast is excellent as well. He says, "What should I do next is a totally ineffective strategy for good work." I think this is so important. And one of the things that I think he talks about here that is really important is it's not just that it's ineffective in that you're like, oh, what should I do next? And I don't know what the priority is. I haven't organized anything. But also, if you're not planning things, you're keeping it all in your head. There's a phrase called cognitive load, which is like the amount of weight that's being put on your like brain and thinking processes, and planning takes that off. So really just keep this in mind. Okay, I've split these tools into 4 kind of problems, but we're going to do tasks that build on each one, but you don't have to use all of them. I just want you to give them a try as we go through. So the first problem is there's so many tasks coming in and it's hard to know how long they're all going to take. It's a disorganized mess. Anyone? I just went to get my reactions up. Anyone feel the same? I'm going to give myself a reaction there. This feels like my whole life. Yeah, we've got a few people feeling the same. So, has anyone heard of the businesswoman, influencer, genius extraordinaire, Grace Beverley? She has multiple businesses. If you haven't looked at Shreddy or Tala, I highly recommend. Really, really smart. She has a book called Working Hard, Hardly Working. Again, I'll send you some resources afterwards that is on there. But this tool, I read it in her book and I've used it every single day, even weekends, because I find it that helpful since then. So the idea of a to-do table is that you split your tasks into quick ticks, which are 5 minutes, tasks, which are less than 30 minutes, and then projects, which are 30 minutes plus, roughly. You can do this for the week and then for the day, if you like, or you can do it on a monthly basis. You can do it every time that a task comes in, you categorize it, completely up to you. I'm going to show you some examples in a minute. But why would we do this? Bye, Sabine. Thank you so much. We'll see you on the recording in the future. Why it's helpful is because it gives you a better view of what's on your plate and what you can achieve with the time and energy that you have in any given day. So I'm going to just jump to what it looks like and then we can come back to this. Super, super simple. Super simple. You can do this in a notebook. You can do it on a scrap of paper. I'll show you this in a minute, but I do it on literally an A4 piece of paper for my week. Split it into quick ticks, tasks, projects, but then I split it up by life area. So I have my day job, my business, and then life, so that I see everything for the week in one place, and I find it super helpful. I do this by hand, personally, it suits me, but you could really easily, if you have a tool, if you use Notion, ClickUp, Asana, any of those, you can just make columns of this, super, super simple, and just do everything, and then you can filter it, which is helpful as well. So I'm going to go back here just to show you something helpful here that I learned quite recently, and it's this kind of psychological thing. If you use a verb, then it sticks to your brain much better. So instead of saying butter deck, it's put a verb onto the front and say finalize butter deck or design butter deck or review butter deck. Because again, it's this cognitive load thing. You've taken that extra step for your future self of this is the thing, this is the action that you have to take. Because so often we procrastinate because we don't know what the next action is. So I found that really helpful. We're going to jump to the task, which is, sorry, I'm really sorry that my Wi-Fi is being a pain. It's been fine all day, which is why I didn't think to move rooms. So either in a notebook, you can do it on your task manager if you use something like that. Piece of paper, you can do it there's a notes section, there's a button notes section as well. So if you click on the notes bit at the bottom, there's shared notes, or you can click the drop down and do private notes. It's completely up to you. So what I want you to do is we're going to take literally just a couple of minutes, like really short, and you're going to think of as many things as you can that you have to do by the end of the month, which is, only a few days away, which is why it's good. And just brain dump them and label them quick tick, 5 minutes. I'll go back to it so you can see it. Quick ticks, 5 minutes. Tasks, 30 minutes or less. Projects, okay? I'm going to give you literally a minute and a half because I want you to, this is the Parkinson's law, right? If I give you 5 minutes, it'll take 5 minutes. If I give you a minute and a half, you'll do it in a minute and a half. Oh, Jessica, ready. Let me go back to it so you can see the categories. Yeah, I like to do paper as well. If it's not on paper, it's not happening for me personally. The other thing I'll say is if those time breakdowns don't work for you and you prefer to do something different, please do. If you want your projects to be an hour plus and you want tasks to be less than an hour, that's you as well. It's whatever works for you.
Okay, all good with everyone? There, perfect. Caitlin, I'll unmute you. Sorry. There. Try one more time. There. Now you're unmuted. Now you're unmuted.
I've turned my background off, so hopefully that helps a little bit. It says my connection is good, so fingers crossed it's a little bit better now. Okay, anyone want to come off mute and tell us a little bit about how you found that? Was that a useful tool? Is that something that you can see yourself using in the future? Anyone got any thoughts? I'll also say, by the way, you don't need to share in this session because I know that these things are quite personal. I want you to know that actually quite often people choose not to because it is like a kind of weirdly personal thing to talk about. But if there's anything, yeah, good for the brain, writing on paper. If anyone else got anything they'd like to share about this, otherwise we can move on.
It was
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Donatella, you want to start first?
Sorry, I was supposed to raise my hand, but I just started talking.
No, go for it. You don't need to raise your hand. It's all good.
Yeah, so I found it very hard to figure out the ticks, hardly enough. Like projects and tasks I can deal with, but when you said put down ticks, tasks, and project until the end of the month, I think I will probably be able to do it for my day. But the longer time frame, it was really hard to come up with the ticks. I don't know if
you'll see this in a minute. I will show you something and you'll be like, it's not just me. That's a really, really good point. I feel exactly the same. I'll show you in a moment, but I actually do mine. So I have my big one and then my days have so many ticks compared to my like weekly one. But also something to think about is like the bigger the ones drop into the smaller ones. So projects are made up of multiple tasks. Tasks are made up often of multiple ticks, if that makes sense. So sometimes it can be helpful to say, okay, if my task is, let's say for me, my task is to finalize my butter deck. If I actually think about it, that's made up of, it could be 5 slides that I need to look at, and each of those could be a tick. And once you break it down like that, you can be like, oh, okay, well, I only have 10 minutes, so I don't have time to do the whole task, but I could do 2 of those slides in that time, just get that done. So that's sometimes a helpful way to think about it. I'm going to move on to the next one so that we have enough time to do all of them. Thank you for sharing, Donatella. Also, iconic name. Fantastic. So I think this is the one that most people resonate with. Everything feels urgent all the time, right? Like it feels like everything is pressing on you. Everything is weighing on you. I'm just checking what you're saying there, Romy. Sorry, mine's. Jessica, I don't know if you could maybe help with that comment there. So everything's urgent all the time. Does anyone know who this is? Anyone shout out? It's Napoleon.
Napoleon.
Yeah, I don't think I would have known. I only know because I Googled it.
I mean, without the height, it would have been difficult.
I made it. So Napoleon had, I find this weird to talk about because I don't like to think of, violence as success, but historically Napoleon had a successful kind of military career until this Battle of Acre. He had a battle called the Battle of Acre where he lost a fifth of his troops, obviously a huge human toll and really terrible. And he got one of his, he ordered like an immediate investigation into what was happening. And so his doctor, who was a humanitarian, actually, his chief doctor, his name was Dominique Jean Leray, I believe. Please excuse my French accent. He looked into it and he found that most of the men who died because they weren't treated quickly enough or effectively enough, i.e., all of these, most of these deaths were preventable. So he made this triage, and in fact, the word triage I found out comes from the French word to sort, which is really interesting. So he made this triage system, and this is super interesting. He had these light ambulances, which were like really light horse-drawn carriages, like 1 or 2 horses that would just zip through the battlefield. And they would triage every injured person, every injured man that they came across, regardless of what side he was on and regardless of what rank he was in. So it didn't matter if it was the lowest from the enemy side, he would still get triaged. And the question was, will he survive without help? If the answer was yes, it was a low priority because they could bring in the heavier kind of ambulances later. The next question was, will he die despite help? And if the answer was yes, then unfortunately, it doesn't make sense to waste, I know it's a horrible way of saying it, but to spend time on someone who is not going to be able to be saved when there are other people who will be able to be saved. On the other flip side, if someone was not going to survive without help and they were going to die they weren't going to die despite help, they were deemed top priority and they were taken off the battlefield. This was put into effect immediately, and within 10 years, they had a 90% recovery rate of men taken off the battlefield. 90%. They went from losing a fifth of their soldiers to a 90% recovery rate. So this is often used in like business schools and things to think about how you can prioritize. You may have heard of it does sound a bit harsh, but it is logical. And so the Eisenhower matrix, which you may have heard of, is, I'm going to show you it first and we'll come back to this page. It's a bit easier to see. So you split a page or a square into 4 quadrants, and we have this urgent box, urgent and important. These are things you want to do right now. It has to get done now, and it's also important. Important's a funny word. I was doing this workshop to some graduates yesterday, and they were saying, well, what do you classify as important? And it's like, well, you need to decide that. You, your manager, your team, you need to know what that is. And it's going to change, but you have to get that muscle. This is all about building muscle, right? So these are things you want to do straight away. If it's not urgent, but it's important, Julie, I find it so helpful. If it's not urgent, but it's important, you decide when to do it. And this is going to play in some other tools we're going to talk about, but like, when is this going to get done? Make sure that you decide it. If it's urgent but it's not important for you or for your team, you can delegate it. So is someone else able to get on with it? Like, it needs to get done, but it's not urgent it needs to get done now, but it's not like, if I don't do this, it's not going to work. A lot of people I speak to are younger and they're like, but I can't delegate, I don't have that. But in that case, you can go to your manager and say, could you help? I've got things that are in the urgent and important box. Would someone be able to work on this? And then finally, we have delete. The things that, we'd like to do them, but are they really important? Are they really something that needs to get done? And I like to put these into a backlog. So it kind of, for me, relieves the anxiety of like, I'm not getting rid of them entirely. They're not like going off into the ether. They have somewhere. And if there is a time where I'm like, oh, I fancy something mindless, some organizing, then I can go and see what's on there. It's also really important to be aware of these dopamine tasks. So the things that you're just kind of faffing around, you're kind of just changing colors for the sake of it. You're just doing silly tasks because you're avoiding something else. Now, interesting, I was speaking to a grad yesterday and she was like, sometimes I really like those tasks, I was like, that's great. Do it intentionally. Remember we said intentional, sustainable, enjoyable. Do it intentionally. If you're like, I'm doing this color coding, organizing task to give my brain a break, to get something done, but to be able to be like, oh, I ticked it off. Go ahead and do it. It's just when we're doing that at the expense of these ones, right? Just going to go back to the previous slide. So why it's really good is when everything feels urgent and important, this really quick method, and I say quick because you can just do it, like you can just grab and write it out. You know, you don't have to do this. I personally use this as a, what's the word? Almost like a painkiller rather than a vitamin. I use it when I'm a bit chaotic and I'm like, okay, I need to quickly categorize my tasks. So it can just help you to get things in order and help you to communicate capacity issues if that's something that's an issue for you. And what I think is really helpful to know as well, because I've had people who are like, but what if I have ADHD? And I'm like, well, I'm in the gang, and it can be particularly useful if you have that, to have that quick sorting situation. Eisenhower, who this is named after, he did not actually come up with this, his college professor did, but you know, what stuck. He said what is important is seldom urgent and what is urgent is seldom important. I think it's just a nice way to summarize this. Sometimes the things that we think are urgent are actually just something we need to categorize differently, but it's hard to see the wood for the trees. So this can really help. So what we're going to do for this next task is I'd like you to take the list that you made and put every item into one of these 4 quadrants. If you use a task manager, like ClickUp or Asana or anything like that, you can make a column and make drop downs for these. I've done that in the past. It's really helpful. But it's really important to remember that there is always an opportunity cost. So everything can't be, it physically cannot be urgent and important. So you need to, yeah, I really love that, impactful. Think about where something really goes, okay? And if it's urgent, but it's due in a week, is it really urgent? Are there other things that need to be done first? And that can help, because then maybe it's important, but it's not urgent. It'll be urgent on tomorrow even, because you want to get it done ahead of time. You know what I mean? Okay. What we're going to do is going to spend like a minute doing this, and then we're going to go into breakouts, and you can think about the questions. How hard was it to prioritize? And what kind of things have you put into each quarter? Just more, to be honest, for a bit of like accountability and a bit of like, we're in it together than anything else. So we'll probably spend 3 or 4 minutes in total on this, and then we'll crack on with the next bits because we've got a lot to get through. If you have any questions, by the way, pop them in the chat. Okay. I think we're actually, instead of doing breakouts, just because we've got not a huge amount of time, I'm able to stay a bit longer. So if there's anyone who wants to stay on, please do. And if you have to jump, then you'll get the recording so you can catch up with the end of it. Completely up to you. I know that we started 10 minutes late, so and you were all here on time, so yeah. It's completely up to you. So anyone have any thoughts and feelings about this?
Yes, I have. And still, I feel perhaps it's not. I don't know if the most of the people are, the first language is English, mine is the third language. So the confusion even comes a little bit more, even the wording is a little bit the same. If I say urgent and important and I make a definition, then I say urgent is, if I am not doing it, it will harm me, I will get sick or I will die.
Yeah.
Important, it's something I have to do, perhaps otherwise I don't have, I have to do my shopping somewhere. I mean, my grocery. Otherwise, I fall out of food or whatever. But if I don't do, I mean, it will not harm me for the rest of my life, because as human beings, as human being, I can stay without food for a couple of days. So I just try to make it for myself understood, but I also sense that in the space there are a lot of people, they are not very clear, and so it's a little bit difficult to make the whole exercise, because I think before doing the exercise it's important to understand what's the difference in between. That came up on my side. Thanks.
That's a really helpful point, and I think there's two things I want to say about that. Sorry, I keep looking over here because all your faces are here. I'll look here. Two things I'll say. One is everything we've spoken about is all about making things your own. So really, that point about languages is so interesting. And if there are definitions or words that make more sense to you for this to make sense, and I saw you mentioning effort and impact, which is a really interesting. I really like that framework as well. Make it your own. This is just a starting point. This is everything here is just a starting point. The idea here is like, how can you quickly prioritize things for when you're feeling overwhelmed? And if that means changing the words that are used to define it better for yourself, please go for it and make that do it. And that goes for whether it's a language thing or whether it's a meaning thing for you, even if English is your first language. If those two words don't resonate, pick two others that you're able to kind of use. The second thing I'll say is that you mentioned about food shopping, right? It's really helpful, I find, to put all your life stuff on here as well, because I think sometimes we act like the life stuff is separate, but it weighs on us the same way as all the work stuff does. So for me, anyway, I find it helpful to put everything in here together. So that's just my personal thing, but it's up to you completely. Does anyone else have anything, or should we move on to the next one?
Donatella seemed to have a question.
Oh, Donatella, please go.
I have one question because, productivity is something that we all have to deal with. But of course, you have thought a lot about it and worked a lot around it. So I was curious because I still find the word productivity really triggering. That doesn't put me in a mind state or in a body state in which I can reach that flow that you showed before, right? The curvy state. The word productivity to me doesn't match with that. So I was wondering if in your research and in your work, you've come across a better word for it, or if you have a proposition of how can we actually change the language around it, because it is, like you said in the Napoleon example, like violence and success are very much connected.
Yeah.
The system we come from, not the system we're building. So I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that or any exploration that you've done that can give us any in that direction. Thank you.
Absolutely fantastic point. Fantastic point. So two things I'll say. One is to take your kind of practical point. One thing that I really like the idea of is effectiveness. So thinking about how you can do the best work that needs to be done, but also in the most efficient use of time. I heard there's a really, I won't send it now because I don't want it to lag anymore. On LinkedIn, Corinne Murray, Corinne, and then Murray is Murray. She is fantastic, and she talks a lot about effectiveness as in a alternative way of thinking about productivity. The second thing I would say though is I really believe in personal power, right? This is what I was saying at the beginning, like autonomy. And I've been exactly where you are, feeling the same way about it. But I have decided to reclaim the word for myself and to just define it for myself and say, this is what I think productivity is for me. And that's the whole point of this anti-toxic productivity, is the anti-toxic bit is just swap it out for whatever works for you. And whether that's gentle productivity or long-term productivity. I mean, I was talking about Cal Newport's book. I've got it right here. So he talks, this is slow productivity. Oh, I've got the blur on. Anyway, I'll send it. Slow productivity. The whole point of that book is about rejecting what productivity has become and redefining it, rethinking it, and I think this is the important point for what you're saying, Donatella, is really putting actually some principles around it and saying, okay, historically, violence and productivity, 100%, whether that's like violence of your mental and physical states, right? Or the aggression that can come in some workplaces, things like that. Or physical stuff as well, which is awful. You can put structures. So here's in this book, he talks about there being three rules that he's put around it for himself, and one of them is like do fewer things, and that's a really, and like move at a natural pace. So he doesn't, and it's again a natural pace for you. So for him, he's a professor, so he spends the summers when he's not teaching doing writing and talks and things like that, because he's got that time and he can slow down and be with his kids and all those sorts of things. So I don't want this to sound like I'm saying, no, like what you're saying isn't like just change the word. That's not what I'm saying, because I know that that's really hard. But I would like to encourage you to think about how you, instead of changing the word productivity for something else, how can you change what it means to you? I hope that helps. I know it's hard though. It's taken me a long time to do it.
Sure. Thank you.
The one thing I will also say, and you've already said this, so I'm just reiterating it, is because you said we're all kind of involved with it, but sometimes I get comments of people who are like, but what if I don't want, some of us don't want anything to do with productivity, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I'm never going to push anything on anyone. That's like a personal value of mine. I'm always just like, this is cool. What do you think? But if you are working, you are engaged with productivity in some sense. You're trying to do work in a certain amount of time, and you want to try and do it to a certain level of goodness, right? So I think everyone is engaged with it in some way, and it's just what you want to do it. Yeah, become aware of the story. Okay. I'm really sorry that we're running over. So if you do have to go, no offense taken. You can, as we said, watch the recording. But I would love to have you if you have the time. It won't go on too much longer. So problem 3, I feel like my brain is always bouncing around between different types of tasks. So this is a quick one. This is an idea called task batching. And the idea is grouping together similar types of tasks to keep your brain in one zone. Sounds obvious, but we don't all do it. Like I often find myself, I bash out a to-do list, haven't prioritized it, haven't batched anything into the right place. I've just written it out and I just get going. I just start. Dorothy, thank you so much. And hopefully you can watch the recording. Thank you, Debbie. It sounds silly. I know it sounds really basic, but not enough of us do it. A really easy example is emails. So I know for myself, one of the signals that I'm being a bit like crazy, a bit chaotic, is I check my emails constantly. But a signal for me that I'm feeling quite calm is I only check my emails in batches throughout the day. And then I can say to myself, is that a priority? Does this need to be actioned right now? Or can I decide when I'm going to do it? So the other thing, though, is things like creative tasks. Why would we, let's say we've got 3 hours in the morning, why would we do something to do with finances, for example, and then do something that's creative or strategic? It doesn't make sense. Our brain is not in the same zone. And as Julie said at the beginning as well, thinking about if your energy is highest in the morning, spend the time on the thing that requires the most energy, right? So hopefully you can see we're starting to layer all these things on and starting to think about, it's not just about whether it's urgent or important, it's also when do you have the time and how do you feel during that time and what else is going on. So there's lots of little moving parts that we start to bring together. I'm going to move on. Oh, this is a nice little quote here. Task batching makes it feel like one fluid execution rather than mentally jumping back and forth from one type to another. There's actually a name for this feeling of like chaoticness in our brains. It's called popcorn brain. You know, when popcorn is like, just going. I definitely resonate with that in different periods of my life. One thing I do for it is I delete social media. That really helps. But this is a way that you can also work with it. So looking at your messages less. it's like I said, if you can try and like check your emails twice a day instead of constantly, that can really help. But also turning your notifications off can help so much. Obviously, again, relate this to your specific work, but see if there's something you can do with that. So this should, like, I just want you to think about this because I want you to be able to get as much in as you can today. But look at the urgent and important box and have a think about which ones should go together. Obviously, because we're only going to the end of the month, it's only a few days, you should be able to just do this at a glance. But which ones could go together? So tomorrow, if you've got some time, which ones could you put together and just get done? So for me, for example, tomorrow morning, I have to prepare a proposal for a client, but then also for my day job, I need to prepare a guide to our new office. And actually, they're quite similar tasks. Like the content is completely different, the audience is completely different, but for both of them, I'm preparing a document, trying to make it visually appealing, I'm trying to communicate something, and actually those two can go together. Does that make sense? Even though they seem like they're kind of, it depends on how. So another way you can think about it is maybe they are thematically grouped. So it could be that you're saying, on Thursday, I'm going to work on my finances all day. So even though the tasks are different, you're keeping it thematically in the same place. So your brain is on finances. That's what we're focusing on today. So you can do it kind of in energetically, thematically, or kind of to do with the content. You see, there's different ways you can do it. Hopefully that's helpful. Moving on to the next one, because I would love to get through. Please don't be afraid of this 35 of 65 thing, by the way. A lot of them are like, where you click it and like 5 different things come up. So just don't think we're already halfway through. So problem number 4 is I've got so many things to do and there's never enough hours in the day. So the final thing, Donatella, I've just seen you send a link to a newsletter, and I'm a newsletter fiend, so I'm really looking forward to seeing what that is. And podcasts, I have a problem with podcasts. I like them too much. The final one is time boxing. You've probably heard of this. If you haven't, don't worry. But if you do one thing, I would suggest trying this. It's really, really helpful. Time boxing. Has anyone heard of it? Anyone do it? Yeah.
Heard of it and sometimes do it.
Okay, cool.
I try to do like I have a bit of ADHD, so the Pomodoro thing really helps with me.
Yeah. That's a great example of like a micro version of it. So I'm just getting so hot here. I've shut the windows so that I can't hear the traffic, so I'm like baking in this greenhouse. Okay. What is it? Time boxing is a really effective time management technique, and it involves planning your day by blocking out specific tasks. And I would really recommend doing this into an online calendar. It's the only bit of my personal planning system, which you'll see in a moment, that when it comes to a day-to-day thing that I do digitally, because it means you can move things around a lot easier. I think that's the most helpful, but you could do it physically. You can do it at the start of each week or day, but we've also, we spoke about the Eisenhower, and there's the bit that says decide. If I'm doing decide, I then decide when I'm going to do it and I block it in. So again, it's taking off that cognitive load. I've already said, this is the priority of this. This is how long it's going to take, because you can obviously put in 2 hours, 50 minutes, whatever. I've put it in. I don't have to think about it. I know that when I come to look at my calendar for the week, it's already in. I know how to do it. I find that really, really helpful. So time boxing gives you really visual, clear limits. It's also really helpful for accountability and intention, control and autonomy. But what is also really helpful is looking back. So if you need to go and do a review, you need to do time tracking, whatever it is. If you're doing like annual reviews at work or whatever it is, I don't know if you're employed or if you're self-employed, you go back and you can see, oh, this is what I did, this is how long it took me. It's also helpful for things like if you put a task in and you're like, this is going to take me 2 hours, and then it only takes half an hour, you can shorten it. So you've got like a record of that, and then you can fill the rest of the time in, or you can go and take a break, watch a film, something delightful. But you can see there what it's going to be. Does that make sense? Like you're able to kind of track it in a way that I personally find really beneficial rather than toxic. Completely up to you though. Neriel, he's written some interesting books which I will send to you. He says, if you don't plan your day in advance according to your values and your schedule, someone else will plan it for you. People are always dropping stuff in. So it's really important to be able to say, actually, I know that thing that you've asked me to do is important, but I've got something to do first that's urgent and important, and then I'll be able to get to that because I've got a half-an-hour block this afternoon and I can do it. Really helps you to communicate. So I'll show you mine in a minute, and there's lots of different ways you can do it. So one thing that's really important is to keep it flexible. So yesterday when I was speaking to these grads, they were all like, but we always get random stuff thrown at us. And I was like, yeah, so you block in random stuff thrown at me time, whether that's a day in a week or it's an hour and a half every day for random stuff thrown at me time. I actually have a friend who does important, not urgent Thursdays and doesn't take any meetings on Thursdays and does all of that stuff that's piled up. Then there is a group called Growth Hackers, which is really interesting. Hate the name, but I love what they do. And they say, yeah, it's really good. They talk about doing UUW time, so unwanted, unexpected work. And they say, think about how that works for you. So when I do that, I put in an admin block every day after lunch when I know my brain is she's not shiny, and put that in, and it means that that's my kind of catch-up time every day, and it's in there, and I know that if something comes up, I've got an hour after lunch that I can deal with it. I think I've just seen someone say something very smart, so I'm just going to check what that was. Yes, Julie, boundaries and saying no. And I think a lot of us say when it's like, oh, saying no, we're like, oh God, but actually it's about saying, I heard a phrase that was really helpful. That was like, I'm really sorry, I'm fully committed at the moment, but I will get to it when I can, or I won't be able to do it at all at the moment. And why I like that phrase is because it says to someone that like commitment is a bigger thing than like I'm too busy. Commitment is I've already said to someone else or to myself that I'm going to see this through. And what I think is great with that as well is when you do something for that person, they know that you're committed to it in the future. So I thought that was a really lovely phrase. And just close this down. Hopefully that you're all still with me. This is a great article. I've just realized it's not in the resource pack, but I really should put it there. Mark Sanders wrote in 2018 an article for the Business Review, the Harvard Business Review. And he said why time blocking was so helpful is because the practice improves how we feel, which is about control, how much we achieve as individuals, which is about productivity, and how much we achieve in the teams that we work in, so enhanced collaboration. And he says that it may be the single most important skill or practice you can possibly develop as a modern professional, as it buys you so much time to accomplish everything else. This is important because I think a lot of people's resistance to time blocking is, oh, it's so restrictive. But it's again, no one's forcing you. No one is sitting with you in your calendar and forcing you to block every moment. It's completely up to you how you want to do it. So you may find, like I personally find blocking every minute of my day is really helpful. But when people say that, like, I'm not blocking 2 minutes to go to the loo or anything like that. Like, that's not what I'm doing. I'm saying I'm going to spend an hour on this thing. I'm going to spend 15 minutes on this thing. I'm going to take an hour lunch break. Sacred. I always take an hour lunch break. All of these things. That for me works really well. That's really helpful for me. But for you, you might say, I don't typically time block my day, but I do in big tasks and projects that need to be done at specific times. So you may have just 1 2-hour block that's like, I need to make this proposal for this client, and everything else is free and empty. Or you might be someone who just blocks the tasks in, but you leave breaks separate. I'm a huge believer in breaks. We're going to talk about this briefly. Huge believer in breaks, but I don't block them in because I do it instinctively and I'm pretty good at it, so I don't need to. So it's all up to however you want to do it. Okay. I'm not going to ask you to do this now because I'm really conscious of your time and I'd love to show you the last bits we've got on here, but maybe do it for tomorrow, right? Go through your day, try blocking everything and see how it feels, because you don't know how you feel about something until you try it. So maybe try blocking everything out and then you can play with it from there, right? You need to see what the boundaries are before you can change it. Also, the top tip is planning the things that you want to do first, whether that's lunch or doing something in the evening, your exercise, walking the dog, picking the kids up, whatever it is, and then slot the work in around it, because our brain loves rewards. And if you can see yourself getting to that time and you're like, it's almost like gamifying it, right? You're like, when I finish this hour, I can go to the playground with my kid for an hour. We're like, bing, 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 great, lights up. So that can be a really helpful thing to do. Try blocking everything out first. A day is usually not enough, so I'd recommend trying it for a week and then play with it from there. You may be like, wow, this is great, it's exactly what I needed. Or you may be like, I hated that. Or you might be in the middle and be like, I want to do the thing where I just block out certain tasks. Completely up to you. Okay. I just wanted to show you that I'm not telling you to do things that I don't do. I will caveat that this is my personal productivity system. I have 2 jobs and an extremely chaotic brain. This for me, I'm not suggesting you do it. I'm just trying to show you that I'm not telling you stuff and then I don't do it myself, because I hate when people do that. So this is I use ClickUp task manager. Sorry, my neck is really tight today. Online task manager, I dump everything into that. This has also got my partner as my co-founder, so it's got all his stuff in there as well, so I can see everything at a glance and I can filter his stuff out. And then I can filter by due date, really helpful. I find that a great way to put it all in. Then if this ever wants to load, this is my really gorgeous to-do table for the week. I can't remember who said it, but finding the quick ticks hard. You can see here I haven't got loads of quick ticks, but I got loads of projects. But as I said, those projects are made up of tasks and those tasks are made up of ticks. So that's okay, that's fine. Because then the next day, but in the mornings, well, actually I try to do this in the evenings, look at how many ticks I have. It's like fun, right? Because once you start looking at them and what you actually need to get done in a day, you suddenly start to break it all down. So this is actually the girl I told you about, Grace Beverly, who came up with this table. She has journals, the planners. In fact, Jessica, would you be able to send in the chat just so that it doesn't make it laggy? It's called theproductivitymethod.com.
Yeah, of course. Wait.
Thank you. So it doesn't get laggy. I find it super, super helpful. But you should just do this in a notebook. I just drew it out myself every day. And then I time block my calendar. And I just put everything in and I block it all out, and you can see I do like every minute of the day. But you can see I do things like travel time. I've got 2 blocks for travel time, for example. 3 blocks actually on that day. I've got that I'm looking after my friend's dog is in there because I need to know that. Like, I find this really helpful. The overall brain dumping obviously is just like sporadic. I rest a lot, So you can see here that this starts at 8 a.m. But I don't get up crazy early. I usually have like a 2-hour, I have a 2-hour like personal time, and I don't have kids, so I have the luxury, and I'm trying to make the most of that before I do have kids. So I take the dog for a walk, chill, have a cup of tea. Sometimes I read, sometimes I do some exercise if I can be bothered. And then you can see actually this task finishes at 7, which is not really ideal. I tend to not work that late. I actually have a really strict rule. I don't work after dinner. And bear in mind that I have a business. It's a bit punchy, like to not work after dinner, but it doesn't work for me. I need 8 hours sleep. So like I said as well, this bit that says prep for workshops, I would actually be taking a lot of breaks during this, but I don't need to block them in because I'm really intuitive. Remember, I have this disability that is physical, so I can physically see when I need a break, so I'm really good at taking myself away, but other people may need to break it and block it in. This whole thing for me takes 10 minutes in the morning. It seems a lot. It used to take a while, now it's quick. Again, I'm not suggesting you do this. I just wanted to show you that I'm not telling you to do something that I don't practice. Okay, I'm going to whiz through. I thought this was such a nice quote. It's from this gorgeous little book that I will put on for you. It's called the Get Things Done book. So nice. It's tiny. You can see it's so small, but it's really lovely. Lots of different little like tips and things, but it's all science backed and like illustrations. It's really nice. They said in it, everything takes longer than you think. Some things are more difficult than you think, but many won't be as bad as you think. And I think that's just a nice little reminder. Okay. Funny you said about rest, Donatella, because that's what this bit's about. So when we were doing this as an app, our kind of little catchphrase was rest to be your best. Has anyone seen this before? No, Julie. Okay, great. Well, I get to show you. So this is a study by Microsoft. Can you see my mouse when I'm pointing on the screen?
We can use the annotation here. Which one do you want?
Oh, hello.
Yes.
Yeah, that's fine. That helps. So the row that Cheska just drew on, that is 4. Yeah, perfect. That is 4 meetings, Zoom meetings, back to back without breaks. So this is quite a small study. It's 14 people, I think, which is obviously not super. You can't. The methodology is leave something to be desired, but it's interesting to help. So 14 people, all wired up, 4 back to back half an hour Zoom meetings. Red is bad, blue is good. So red means more stress, blue means less stress. So you can see here, start off, okay, getting a bit stressed here, really stressed here. And then when they're coming out of the meetings and the last one, it's like a little worse than the first one. This second row, same people, they knew what was happening, which is, I'm going to talk about that in a minute. They knew what these studies were. And this is 4 Zoom meetings with 10-minute meditations in between. And what I think is super, super interesting, a few things. Obviously, we can see that with breaks, it's more blue. Great, we can see that. Breaks are good. Fine. 2 things I really want to call out is that the brain on the top row is more stressed starting off than the brain in the second row. And what I think that, like, I think we could feel this personally, right? How many of us have been going into 2 hours of meetings with no breaks and you're like, before you even start? Whereas if you know you have 10 minutes in between each one to go get a cup of tea, to have a little breather, to do some meditation, whatever, it's a bit less stressful. What I think is super interesting is that the last brain on the bottom row is bluer, i.e. less stressed than the first brain. So what this is suggesting, even though this is a really small study, what it's suggesting is that breaks are not just bringing us back to baseline, but they're restorative. And they can make us feel better than when we started, which I think is fascinating. There's a lot of other science that backs that up as well. So this is just showing you, if it decides to load, this is just the key from Microsoft. And also super interesting, I told you they knew what the study was. So I think it's really interesting that that knowledge must have played a part. If anyone here is athletic, I'm not personally, but we do know anecdotally that no sports person has got a program that doesn't involve intense rest, like really intense rest. I was speaking to an Olympian a while ago, and he was saying that rest is protected in your calendar with the exact same vigor as training. And I don't think we do that with work. So I thought this was a great quote. So as every great athlete understands, the highest performance occurs when we balance work and effort, rest and renewal. Loads of research, but the 2 things it is, taking breaks improves productivity and well-being at work, and they need to be regular to be effective. They do not agree, and there's lots of studies on this, they do not agree on what those breaks need to be and what regularity looks like. So what the summary I've come to, and I actually spoke to a behavioral science PhD about this, and she was like, yeah, I think you're right, is that it's up to you. Whatever the regularity is, whether it's I take a 5-minute break after every Zoom call, or every hour I go and stretch my legs, whatever it is, whatever needs your body and your brain needs, that's what's right. So a few things you can do. If you want to feel calmer, you can try some breathing or meditation. If you want to feel more energized, you can get up or you can stretch at your desk. Funny how not weird that is to do in the office. Whenever I stretch at my desk in the office, people just start doing it as well. If you want to feel more focused, there's studies that find that journaling and doodling can really help. But at the end of the day, it's about not just what does science say is best, but the best breaks are always going to be something that you enjoy doing and that makes you feel good. The other thing I'll say is all of these, the reason I put them up is there's research that shows that these are really good if they're done on a micro level. So even if you're just breathing for a minute, that can really help your nervous system. Meditation, there's studies that have shown that meditating for just 4 minutes can have a really positive impact. I'm really conscious of your time, so I'm trying to whiz through this. Okay, some small things that add up. What I'm gonna do is show these and just shout out if any of them either don't make sense to you and you want me to talk about them, or if there's any that you do. Otherwise, screenshot it. Obviously, you're going to get a recording of this, but screenshot this because these are little things that make a difference. Does anyone have any of these that they want to share that they do, or that they want me to talk about?
Maybe I'll put the annotations on for everyone. If you guys can like mark which ones, the three ones you do the most, that would be awesome.
Like marginal gains bingo. So if anyone hasn't
Yeah.
heard the phrase marginal gains, really, really interesting history. I won't go into it because I've kept you for a long time, but it's the idea of like things that take you 1% further instead of these like big, I'm going to change my life today. It's like, what's one tiny thing that you can do to take you a little bit further to how you want to feel? I saw some on habit stack. Eat the frog. Sometimes people are like, what the hell does that mean? It's the idea of doing the hardest thing or the most important thing first. Yes, monotasking over multitasking. So that idea is instead of being like and doing all these different things, giving your attention to one thing. And I think that's true of everything really, is whatever you're doing, be 100% in it. Like we've been talking about how this is like a muscle, right? That's true of everything. Like if you're having a conversation with someone, just have the conversation with them and don't do anything else in terms of like checking your phone or being focused elsewhere. Like be in the moment. If you're doing a task, just do that task. Don't do other things. I think that's really, really important. Are there any other things here that people would like me to talk about specifically? Clearly, I need to invest more in my environment and get a stronger router because the Wi-Fi has been a pain.
Maybe we
Okay,
can
cool.
just run this while you're also going through the slides. People can share a bit on what productivity technique has actually helped you that you can share
Yes,
to the
please.
group. I know a lot's been shared already in chat, but it would be nice to hear from everyone.
Yeah, if there's anything else. While you're doing that, I'm going to tell you the last bit. This is literally the last bit of the session. Thank you so much for bearing with me. So the last bit is that you cannot control it all. So one thing that we can't control, as Donatella was saying, is like the external kind of rhetoric around productivity and systems and history, but I do think we can try to think about these for ourselves. The next one is there's this fantastic book called Stolen Focus by Johan Hari, and a lot of it is about how big tech, and I know this sounds like a conspiracy thing, it's not, this is literally true. Tech is designed to take our attention. That's the point. It does it so that we can have more eyes on ads, more advertising dollars, all of that. And so they're designing these things. They're like slot machines. It's like a dopamine hit. Like every time you see a new story, you want to watch it. Every time you stroll up, you want to see it again. Thank you so much. Thank you, Romy. Then it's just like da, 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 and it makes you want to stay there. But actually, that's that's not your fault. Obviously, the best thing to do is to go cold turkey and delete your socials, but that's hard because they're social, right? Like I love Instagram. I'm absolutely love it. For me, I delete it a few weeks at a time and then I come back intentionally and I'm like, I'm going to spend a bit of time on it and then I come away again. But it is really, really hard. The second thing is the efficiency trap. This beautiful, beautiful book, 4,000 Weeks. The efficiency trap is the idea that the fallacy that by getting more done, we'll have more time. And that is just not the case. Oliver Burkeman, who wrote it, he has this beautiful idea. Donatella, I literally just put that on my list this week. I saw that in a bookshop and it's just gone on my list. I think you'd like, Donatella, from what you've been saying, I think you'd like Oliver Burkeman. He has a newsletter called The Imperfectionist, which is really about kind of reclaiming the ideas of productivity. So he suggests that we need to accept that the list will never be done and we need to learn to live in the discomfort of the list never being done. And I think that's a really nice idea. Like some things are just, they're going to fall off the desk and we're never going to deal with them. And that's okay because that's what we've been doing for our whole lives. You know, we've been doing that forever anyway. So we just need to accept it. I think that's a really nice kind of relieving thing to think. Okay, I'm going to bash through so we can get to this is one of those ones where each slide is a new bullet point. So my key takeaways, there are proven ways to harness your productivity, but new habits are very, very hard. Super, super important to find what works for you. And that goes for language, as we've been saying, as well as tools and habits and systems. You need to be patient. These things you don't do it for one day and it works. Like maybe you do it for one day and it works, but like if you do it for one day and it doesn't work, keep trying it for a little bit longer. Have an experimental mindset, like set boundaries around it. Say, I'm going to do this for 2 weeks. I'm going to give it 100%. And then at the end, I'll refer back to it and see how it went. Be consistent. Like it's not going to work if you do a little bit here, a little bit there, unless that's your intention. Unless you're like, I want to do just one task a day, time box, then that's fine. It's all about intention. And you will see a benefit if you try different things. Not necessarily these things, but if you try different things, if you think, okay, how do I want to feel when it comes to work and doing good work? Let me go and research what that might be. Then you will see a benefit. I want to just see these ideal week versus actual week review. I love that. Yeah, timer. Yeah, gamifying it. Like if you're competitive, like I am, putting a timer on can be a really helpful way of doing it. Trying to eat well, 100%. Daily exercise. If I don't exercise, I'm so grumpy. It's just, and I don't even like exercise. The 5 minutes thing, I think that's such a good point. Like, if you just say, I'm just going to do it for 5 minutes, usually once you've started, you're like, I may as well do it now. I'm here now. It's going to be more effort to stop than it is to carry on. I love that. Thank you. Yes, we definitely should compile. I do have a compiled list for you, which I will send you afterwards. So I've got some book recommendations and things, but yes, there's some really good ones. Okay, so the last thing I'll say is we made it. We made it to the end. Thank you so much. I really hope you enjoyed it, and thank you so much for staying on an extra half hour. I really appreciate it, especially when the weather is so gorgeous. Please do share your learnings on LinkedIn and Instagram. I would love to see it. I'm also a small business, so I don't spend anything on marketing. So your kind words and feedback, constructive feedback, is how I sell things. So please do. And there's just my email if you want to send me anything, not on LinkedIn or whatever. My email is there as well. If anyone's got any questions, I'm happy to stay for a few minutes, but otherwise I've kept you forever. So please do go and enjoy the rest of your days, and let me know how you get on. Importantly, let me know what you try and how you get on with it. Thanks.
Thank you. Let's all give. I'm going to open the soundboard now. Let's maybe press S. Let's give Caitlin a round of
Thank you so much.
Everything was super practical, so I hope everyone got something out of it. And thanks to everyone for sharing their own practical snippets too. Like, so much.
Thank you so much. Caitlin, I don't know that it's necessarily your internet. Your headphones battery level could be really low, which is why it's cutting out. And
I don't think so. I just charged them, and they're not. Do you know what? I'm going to have to go and do a review of all my different things and see what's going on. But it could also be that I live with loads of people, so it could be that.
No. If ever, let's. I'll also check on our end, Julie and Caitlin, and then let you guys know later.
Thank you for bearing with, though. If there was anything that kind of got broken up and you didn't really hear it or whatever, just drop me a message. I'm more than happy to go through it. Donatella, did you had a question?
Yes, sorry, today I'm very active.
No, I love it.
No, because I didn't expect how this topic actually brought, like, I didn't realize I've actually have dwelling with this topic a lot. Like, it was in the back of my mind, but the fact that I spent an hour and a half here just brought back all the research that I've already done. But I have one question, because usually we talk about productivity as what we need to do to move forward, right? The project or whatever. So I was interested in what are your learnings and techniques to actually move backwards, because the real problem is when we have a lot of learnings, a lot of activities, a lot of projects that we never have time to digest them. So I don't know, I've gone through like 5 notebooks in a week, and it's been like insane. So not only for forward planning, but for backward digestion or for backward retrospective or integrating the learnings. Like, if you had learned anything about that, which is kind of like a big struggle, because it looks like you always move forward, but then you feel like you never learned anything. And then, so that was kind of like my question for now.
That resonates with me so much, I can't even tell you, in 2 ways. One is that I am a learning fiend. Like, my stacks of books are like, it's problematic. Like, this is half of the one that's just on my desk. Like, it's mad. There's all sorts of really interesting stuff around learning, around like the science of learning, right? And one of them is the forgetting curve. If you don't put something that you learned into action within the first day, I think it is, it's not going into the brain. So that's one thing, one practical kind of point.
That gives me so much anxiety. And ever since I've learned it, right? I was like, okay, I am effed. Because
one thing I really like is and this is probably annoying for my fiance, but when I learn something new, I'm like, I just learned the thing, and then I'll tell him about it. And once I've said it, I can remember it. So, for example, that Napoleon story that I told you, I read that, and then I went and told him that, and I was like, oh God, I'm gonna have to write. Before we start the session, I was panicking because my speaker notes are in my Canva, but I didn't have the notes for that in here. And then I was like, actually, no, I've said it before. I know it. Like, it's in my head now. So maybe if there's someone, even if you did it on a voice note, maybe to yourself,
a voice note,
that could be helpful, because there's the whole thing of like, there's some interesting stuff around working memory, you know, where you, the auditory loop of like, if you hear something, then it can go, it's one theory of memory, but that's one. So that could work. But the other reason I really resonate with that is, I told you at the beginning that Interlude used to be an app, right? And it was really tough when we decided to close that down and focus. I mean, before we decided to focus on the workshops, we were just like, we're shutting the business down. And it took me 8 months, I think, to, obviously I still have my day job, but I took 8 months of like being really slow. And at first I felt really guilty and really like awkward, and I didn't like it. And then after a while I was like, I spent 3 years doing this 24/7, like literally constant. I would dream about it. I mean, I did it with my fiance, so we'd literally like wake up and be like talking about it. So why wouldn't it take the best part of a year to come down from it, you know? So actually, what I learned from that is this session that we've just done, I do this to companies, and this used to be my kind of key session. But actually, you'll see it on the website. I've built out a new offering, which is 3 sessions, and this is the middle one. And actually, the first one is the retrospective one. So we start by looking back, and we start by being like, and it's called Chaos, that session. And we start by thinking about, what does chaos look like for us and feel like for us? And what are the triggers? What are the signals? What do I need to do to get myself out of that? What things, and this was actually inspired by a document. I did some therapy, and my therapist made me this one piece of paper that just had all the things that I said I liked on it and that made me feel better. And she was like, I've made this for you so that whenever you feel like you're like down, you don't, again, it's the cognitive load thing. She's like, you don't have to go and be like, okay, what will make me feel good? She's like, you've got a piece of paper that says, go and walk the dog.
Yeah.
Go and make some pasta. Like, go and cook something for someone else. Like, so for me, that was really, really helpful. So it's really interesting that you've brought that up, because that's like exactly the conclusion that I've come to with all of this, is that actually we have to start by going backwards before we can go forwards. So hopefully that helps a little bit. If you haven't read Slow Productivity, I think you'll really like it. I feel like from the things you've said today that I would start with that. I think you'll really enjoy that book.
I'll check it out for sure.
It's very thoughtful, you know. It's really great. I think you'll like it. I hope that helps.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Romy, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I did. And sorry for not putting the video on, because my connection is much better when I don't put it on. So
That's okay.
while you showed your load of books, it just came up with me. I was one of them, and I stopped it because I understood that all the knowledge in this book, it's old knowledge. It's not the newest one. The newest one is when I go out into my field and I am connected. And then I have the knowledge that's really for me and for myself. Meaning that going through a few books, repeating them, and more listening to our energy and to ourselves sometimes much more helps. And it very much releases the stress of having 100 books to finish and to read. And yeah, that's what came up for it.
It's so funny you say that. You sound just like my coach. My coach is always like, you don't need more information, you need more courage. And I'm like,
yeah, I think, by the way, we are living in a time of information, in a sea of information. It's not the way. We have to swim inside it, and we have to make the way through. And it doesn't mean
Yeah.
more is better. It's about quality and not quantity.
Definitely. And also, kind of conversely as well, my coach was saying, he was like, learning is the overachiever's favorite way to procrastinate and like just not get on with the work. And I was like,
Absolutely, I agree.
oh, I feel
that hit the spot.
personal attack. But it's true. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much, Romy.
That was really
do think,
great, and I have really a lot of insight. If you come back, we can have you go on a call, because I think there are tools I am using. There could be even complete what you are doing, but very much on a personal level.
Yeah,
Just
hearing
connect on
people
Butter. I always love to go on Butter. Was a little bit away the last time, but now I'm back. So, okay.
it's the best, isn't it? It's the best tool. Thank you so much, Romy.
It's the best.
Marlana, is there
Absolutely,
anything
I
you wanted
agree.
to add?
And the community behind also. And
Yeah, so
Jessica, you're
good.
doing a great job. I always like to
You
see your smiley face. Okay.
Thank you. I think we're really at time, so
we're really
we're really at time. One last thing actually that sort of resonated, like when when Caitlin was also sharing, like I feel there's something about how stubborn we are sometimes with our life goals and giving ourselves time. Like I don't know if it's the getting hung, like a practice I try doing is this life review every quarter, just to see if the goals still sort of align, and or if I'm getting just stuck up on goals that are not really getting pulled where my energy is pulled already. But anyhow, that's a topic for next time. And thank you so much, Caitlin. I hope everyone seemed to have to get a lot out of it. And thank you so much for sharing your own tools. The conversation.
Thank you so much for having